All right, it's Friday morning. That means Practice Underwater is back. I'm in George's home right now,
Yeah, you are.
right inside it. It's a beautiful house. We have this amazing podcast set up. I feel like a real podcaster. We're here for Voices of Dentistry in Scottsdale starting tomorrow. So this is quite a treat. This is the first time we've done it in person.
Yeah, and we have our podcast producer with us, John, and he definitely spoiled us. I mean, we got some nice mics. Hope the audio quality is good for you guys for this intro outro for the next few episodes. So I'm pretty excited.
Nice. So we have another guest on today. He is another new grad owner, like yourself, George. Similar timeline. Graduated in May, into the practice in July. Had a great supportive seller, great supportive staff. The seller just left him a month ago. So in January, he's now there alone. We got into a lot in this interview. I really had a blast with them. I felt like I could be like friends with this guy. So this was just a joy for me to produce. So
I'm excited. I think, I think anytime you listen to a new grad who bought a practice out of school, it definitely reminds me of, something I did, and mixed feelings. I think if you ask a lot of us, I think we have mixed feelings about it, but it'll be a cool interview. I'm excited.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. Here's our interview with Joe. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. We have another new grad owner guest. We seem to be finding those all over the place. It seems like, maybe our listenership is just like on top of the world here. They're getting an ownership right out of school. So our fake doc's name is Joe. So Joe, welcome aboard.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. I appreciate you being on. Why don't you give the audience a little background on you and how you got started with this practice?
Okay, so I graduated 2019 in May. About December of my D4 year, I reached out to several different transition companies and told them I was looking for a practice. And a couple of them really didn't want to play. They didn't really think they wanted me to get 6 months, kind of like the banks too. That was the same story I heard from them. 6 months, or the biggest practice you could buy was $300,000, $400,000. And so one of them was willing to work with me. They sent me a good practice, but it was rural. At first, I kind of was hesitant, but then once I saw the numbers on the practice and met the staff, it was a dream come true.
So what did the bank and the transition company see in you that you think they were willing to take, the small risk?
Well, literally I had the numbers and I sent to the bank a business plan, and it outlined where I could add value to the practice. He wasn't doing ortho, he wasn't doing a lot of endo, he wasn't doing implants, and he was sending out a ton of implants. And so I told him, within a year I could get trained on how to do that and add value right there. And the banker actually wrote back and said, this is exactly what he needed to go to the vice president. And, they did that. And then I'm also a little older, I had a career before dental school. So I think they looked on that I had some life experience.
Was it like a business related career?
No, it was military.
Okay. Awesome. And I think that's an important lesson for people listening. Like, these banks are made up of people. Yes, they have rules that what their guidelines are with how they operate. Like, you need to be 6 months out of school, or for people in New York, like myself, it was, you got to be 6 months out of residency. But if you give the compelling story, and like, they can sell that to the underwriters and the people above them, like, there's always a workaround. And I love how you did that. It's really great.
Thank you.
So you found this practice through this firm that was looking for you. What about it attracted you to it?
Literally what I did was I drew a 700-mile circle around my home, and I told them I will go anywhere in this circle because that's about how far I can drive with the kids. So I looked at probably 10 or 15 practices and actually did some financials on 4 or 5 more. And this one just stood out because, I think right now with the debt load a lot of students come out with, if you're not looking at a practice that's producing 600 or 700, it's hard to cover your overhead and pay student loans and your practice loan. Whereas an old doc who's making producing 600, I think, that's probably a comfortable living for them. And it hurts us to have so much debt because I really couldn't look at the $400,000, $500,000 practices that the banks were willing to loan me on.
I totally agree with that. What was the debt that you came out of school with?
Well, I actually had no debt.
There you go. Oh, that's right. The military. There you go.
Yeah. They paid for dental school. So I had an unfair advantage in that sense going to the banks, but I felt like even if because most of the banks actually told us the student debt wouldn't hurt someone that badly because they look at it differently than different kinds of debt. So I think if you have a good business plan and like you said, they're people and you talk to them, I think anyone could do it if they really, really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean it's just an important lesson, like to not let the monkey rules stop you. If you want something bad enough, like there's a way to make it happen. Like people like you, tons of other new grads who came out bought up right out of school have done it. It's possible. What would you say, like, how were you so ready to make this jump? Like, how did you feel so ready clinically and like from a business sense to jump right into it?
I think the biggest thing was, utilizing your 4 years of dental school. They suck, but if you find the right mentors and, I listened to every podcast I could find, shared practices, all of them. So I think that helped business wise. And clinically, if you really go to your professors, and I think don't just do the bare minimum, really work your tail off, sacrifice some time in school. And I'm sure it depends on the school you're at. Ours was very clinically strong. They'd let you do almost anything and do as much as you wanted to. So that made a big impact, and that's really helpful. It comes down, you got to do a gut check. Do you know yourself well enough to say I can do this, or let's wait 6 months? And I don't, think that's the wrong thing to do either. I think you just got to know yourself.
Yeah. How do you think like someone looking at dental schools can tell like what the clinical training is going to be like? Because like for me, I went to Tufts. Clinical training was terrible, like just bad. 10 crowns, no molar endo. Just like I was such like a gunner that I felt so ready, but looking back on it, I really wasn't ready. And I compare it to people who went to Creighton or Midwestern and some of these other schools that really they do a ton. So how do you know a good way for a pre-dental student to find that?
I think you got to talk to the students and the grads. That's how I found out. I was, as military, I was able to apply in 3 different states and get in-state tuition. So I really talked to, whenever I did my interviews, I talked to the students there. And this school, all the schools I looked at, they said they were all clinically focused. So, and I think, the forums, there's a lot of forums out there you can go to and you can ask those types of questions, Student Doctor Network, all those that can really point you in the right direction. And there's schools that have a history of being more non-clinical. So,
yeah. Because like you said, the schools are always going to position themselves as like, we're clinically focused, like we're going to give you the best experience, but that may not be the case. Talking to students is probably the best, way to find that out. Or like you said, the different forums. Okay. So you found this practice in the summer. You went ahead and bought it. Tell us a little bit about, the practice, what the seller did afterwards and how it's going so far.
Okay. So, about February, I started really getting serious about it. I got a lawyer, CPA, started the contracts. We set the close date for July 1st. So I graduated in May. We took boards first and graduated. That was fun. And then, so we set it for July, came up. I'd met the staff a couple of times before, and the plan was for him to do 6 months as an associate. I wanted a year, just with that handoff, and to help with production, but he was having some health issues, so we just decided 6 months would be perfect, and I was fine with that. I'm not going to chain the guy to the chair and make him work an extra 6 months. So, what really I fell in love with though was the staff. Like the guy he didn't have systems like how we think about him now, but he was 72, and the way he had trained his staff, and even though it may not have been written down, they all knew their job, their role, and that set me up for success right there. When I talk to a lot of my buddies from dental school and they wonder how I do it, I said, it's not me, it's the systems. And it's, I walked up to a ball tee on the tee and hit the ball. So it goes back to him. A lot of the decisions he made were so forward thinking. And even at 72, he bought an iTero scanner,
Wow.
or a 3-shape scanner. So things like that, he was trying to stay on the cutting edge. Everything was digital. It was a walk-in turnkey practice in that respect. But we're in a town of 5,000 people. It's a small town. So my wife wants a Target and we don't have one.
Yeah. It sounds like you even like, as much as you bought the practice, you bought the seller. Like you just liked his vibe, what he had built and like all he had created and how he like stayed up with the trends rather than most of these selling docs you see that are just kind of like biding their time to retirement, not investing in anything.
Exactly.
So he stayed on. Did he just? So he just left this
Yeah,
month.
January 1st was his last day. And he told me, he's like, out the door, he said, if you need me, PRN, let me know. He'll come in and cover for me. But he was ready to be done. I think it was catching up with him, and he's 73 now, so he was ready.
Yeah, it's time. Okay, so what was the practice doing when you bought it? What was the price you bought it at?
So he was doing about 1.1 the last, like 2017 numbers and 2018 numbers, I believe. And the asking price was 600.
That's a great deal.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming he's got this overhead in check.
His overhead was a little high. It was about 70 or so, 68, 70. But again, he was going to the best lab, the best materials. And I kid you not, I probably have 20 composites, A2 composite, like just completely oversupplied for, of every shade. It's unbelievable. I'm set for life. They'll all expire before I use them.
Yeah, you never know what those expiration dates are. They actually true, or do you got to
exactly.
By
It's like water bottles have expiration dates. So.
Do they? I didn't actually know that. All right. So you got in there in July. The seller's still there. How did the staff take you? How did the patients take you? How did you generally feel about your first 6 months?
It was a whirlwind, but it could not have gone any better. Like, you hear a lot of horror stories, and I was waiting for the other boot to drop and for the seller to turn into this, troll or something. I don't know. But for the most part, he did a really good job of communicating with his staff, and most of his employees had worked there for 20 years. And so I thought that was going to be my biggest challenge, but I think it was my biggest asset because, and I've heard this from the staff and patients, if doctor got you, you must be good. If he trusts you with this practice, you must be good. So, and it helps, and that makes me feel good too, that, he had a couple trial runs, I think, in the past, and they didn't work out. And so they were real hesitant at first, but as soon as they met me, I feel like we meshed really well right off the bat.
Nice. Yeah. It's so good to come in an office that has a trusted seller, patients love, staff loves. It's a seamless transition, like you said. So how have your numbers been these past 6 months? Have you increased, decreased?
They've actually increased because there's 2 docs working. I came in, even though my speed wasn't where it is today, and I think that's probably my biggest handicap was speed, being able to do a full mouth of composites if I had to. So, but the numbers are better because he stayed in and he worked hard. He worked 2 weeks straight, and then he only worked 2 days a week after that. But it was just enough to really help the numbers, to carry the practice. And so the biggest issue, though, in terms of numbers is the new patients. This is such an established practice. If we get 2 or 3 a month, true new patients, not patients who've been gone for 5 years and come, but, true, not reactivation, but true new patients. I feel like we're not doing anything there. And he did no marketing. He put an ad in the local calendar or the local, football program or support the local fire department, but no real marketing. He had a Facebook page that had a lot of followers, but I don't know what that's actually worth nowadays.
Yeah. So, how many ops is it? What do you have for staff?
We have 5 ops, 2 full-time hygienists, 2 full-time assistants, and a front desk. And she's the office manager.
She's the manager. Okay. So was there a reason he didn't invest in marketing, or he just didn't feel like he needed it?
He didn't feel like he needed it. He's kind of that old school, when he came through, it was illegal to put an ad in the yellow pages. So I just felt like that kind of carried over. And the practice was doing fine. I just don't think he saw the need.
And this has always been a one doctor office?
He had his son here for a while, and then his son left and went to perio school and went to a different state. So they've had a couple of associates. And like I said, they tried out a couple where they were going to maybe transition to buy, but none of those worked out. So it's probably been a single doc practice 95% of the time.
Okay. So now we got a decent picture on where you're at, how things have gone for the 6 months. At this point, we really like to get into your vision for the practice, like where you see it in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. So where do you see this office going, or what is its trajectory?
what I'm really trying to build now, and what I told the bank was I'm trying to build that super GP practice. Where we're in a small town, we're treating rural, and we have patients who drive, an hour or two to come see us because we're on the main thoroughfare. So people come from the hills practically to come see us. And I just had a CBC installed. It's actually just got up and running this morning, everything going. So,
Nice.
the closest CBCT was an hour away. So if they needed endo or, an implant, that's where we had to send them. We do have a periodontist in town and he's really good, but they'd send them up to the local, an hour away to get a CBCT, then come back here and do the implants 1 day a week. So I'm really trying to build a practice, and I think that can serve the more patients and keep everyone under one roof.
And do you want to switch spots? I'll take your I'll take your area. You can come up to New York.
No, I'm good.
No, you good? Okay. The offer's on the table if you want it in the future.
All right.
Good.
Does it have a Target and a Chick-fil-A? That's all my life.
No, actually, it doesn't. So
no deal.
We don't have Chick-fil-A's in the Northeast. They're few and far between. All right. So you've taken the implant courses in this past 6 months, and you're ready to go with them.
Yes.
Nice.
That's and we got at school. We had a pretty good department. Pretty much an introduction implants. We pretty much did everything but place them. The perio residents placed them. So for me, it was literally just putting the titanium in the bone, and then I got it.
Now
we restored and we impressed. We did everything except put the titanium in.
Nice. So do you see this office in the future as a single doctor super GP, or do you see having an associate?
I think I'll have to have an associate. I just think there's too much dentistry to be done. And right now I'm feeling it without him here. We would have these huge days when the both of us were here. And now with just me here, even though my speed's up, we're not having those big days. Now I'm going to add some big ticket items with the implants and everything. So I'm hoping that'll turn around, but there's not enough dentistry. I'm covered up at one point last year, I was covered up 6 weeks in advance.
Wow.
Hygiene is booked out at least. We're booking, the 6 months recall. That's almost the first time you can come in. And I know, listening to you and George, that the 2 weeks or so, right, is what you're looking for in that. And I don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to check 3 hygiene and do all the stuff I have right now.
Yeah. You said it right there. That's a good, but also a negative thing,
yes.
To be booked out that much, especially in hygiene. Like, you're talking about a lack of new patients. Well, where are they going?
That's what my office manager said.
So, I'll ask you that question. Like, what are you planning to do with that problem?
We have a hygienist who's retired, but she'll cover a couple of days a month for us. So I'm thinking of having new patient days where she'll work maybe every other week, do a full day and I'll put her on our established patients and have my rockstar hygienist do the new patient exams. So that's the plan right now. And I think that should work, but again, we'll have to see.
Are you thinking like a slow build to having a full-time associate, or is that something like you want to ramp up to in the near future?
I'm not sure yet. My gut feeling is I need an associate. That if I was to just, because I saw those numbers with the other doc here, and I think once I start doing implants and more ortho cases, I feel like I'm going to be getting pulled in too many directions. So
yeah, the issue there is your space. Like, you clearly have the need for what sounds like a third hygienist. Like, that could probably be put in on Monday. Not be fully booked, but definitely have some getting 2 fully booked. So at that point, you're at 5 ops, 3 of them are hygiene. You got 2 ops left. I doubt you want to share. You want to just have 1 for yourself and 1 for an associate. That doesn't seem like It would work out. So is there opportunities to expand capacity, or have you ever thought of doing like split hours? Like, how do you see that all fitting in?
Well, we could probably put 1 or 2 more ops in the office. My office, we could put a op in, get rid of the office, put an op here. And there is an area we could probably put 1 more, but there is a downstairs to the building. And if I purchased the building, I could put stuff down there too and have like all the oral surgery, implants, everything downstairs, or move the lab downstairs. I could rearrange the space and probably get a third. So that'd be 8 ops at that point.
What's in the downstairs of the building now?
He rents it out.
Okay.
And they'll be gone in April.
See, you got to have the personal office though. That's the best part about owning. Sitting in the big chair, everyone's gone, you're just hanging out. Like that's my favorite part.
Well, I'll put an office downstairs then.
Okay, you can't not have an office. You got to have one.
Okay.
Good. So like what do you have goals for 2020? Do you have like collection goals? Do you have, new patients? Like where are you headed this year?
Right now, I told the staff our collections goal was 1.2. And our new patient goal was 10 a month. But like you said, we don't even have the space for them. I think we'll meet that. And then I'm trying to get our Google reviews up. So I'm trying to focus on our Google reviews. We were at 4, I think, when I bought the practice, and we're like 22 now. So they've been, and they only really started the last couple of weeks because again, I was maxed out. Everything was running smooth and we were busy, so I didn't really turn my eye on the Google reviews. But now that I'm starting to see, that 6-month honeymoon's over, like y'all talk about, and I'm starting to look at the projections. Now I'm thinking, okay, when do you need? It's a dying practice, and the numbers are there, but it is a dying practice because I can see that, with practice by numbers, how many inactivations we have every month, and that's way more than the number of new patients we have.
See, I like talking to someone who's listened to us, so I don't have to say the same things over and over. This is beautiful. You can just talk yourself. I can just sit here and have some beers or something. No, it's good. So we have capacity issues. That's the biggest. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And there's got to be something. I mean, adding the other hygienist is fine. You're comfortable with doing 2 doctor ops and 3 hygienist ops and just doing that in the interim?
I think that's what we're going to have to do. Yeah. The biggest thing is we're CEREC, so a crown eats up so much chair time. So again, exactly capacity is our biggest issue right now. And we're trying to figure out a way we can work around that.
Yeah. You almost like something you have to send them back to the waiting room.
Yeah.
Have someone else come in and get them a coffee or something and have them hang out. So you've gotten up to the 20 Google reviews. Is that just by asking for them yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The hygienist has started asking, say, we just changed the name of the practice. Would you mind giving us a Google review? And everyone seems to be, and I told them, the patients who will be a good ask. Don't ask the one that's cursing my name as they walk out the door.
So here's what you're going to do. You've heard us talk about Swell, I bet a ton of times. So on Monday, you're going to email them. You're going to say, hey, I want to sign up. And you're going to sign up.
Okay.
That's my only demand of the show is that. Because there's so many cases of that being the sole reason these things jump. Like you can still do the ask, which is great. Keep doing that. But having them, you're up to 100 in, 4 months, maybe less.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So here's your one action item to take away.
Writing it down.
We'll get more. Okay. So have you done any marketing yourself since you've taken over?
Not really. I have not.
Have you thought of doing any?
Yes. I actually reached out to y'all. I think it was after y'all talked about that mailer y'all did. Was it Georgia did that? Mm-hmm. So I really liked that. I thought that was really, I've never seen anything like that. And I think that would bring in a high quality patient, because if I gotten something like that where I lived previously, I think I would have at least read it.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I'll very likely do. There's a radio station here and I've heard a dentist on there advertising. I don't know how many people listen to the radio anymore. And the Google AdWords and everything, I have no essay on, no knowledge of that stuff yet. And again, it was outside my focus because I was just trying to do dentistry the last 6 months.
Sure. Yeah. You had, I'm sure, plenty going on. That now kind of your head above the water, the seller's gone. You can start to think about this kind of stuff. That's funny you mentioned about getting the mail yourself, because the way I found my associate's job was actually I kept getting mailers from this office near my apartment when I was in residency. I was like, wow, this is a really good looking mailer.
Mm-hmm.
I really like them. I looked them up online. I knew about them. And then I saw a job opening from them. I was like, I know that name. And it was that one. And I ended up working there. I was so impressed by it, and it showed by that. And it works so good in a rural setting too. Get the mailer and the radio. I love the mail and the radio idea for you. I see both of those.
Yeah, we sent out a mailer announcing me, joining the practice. And I can't tell you how many patients have said, oh, because we sent out a picture of me and my family, and how many said, I really like the mailer. So I do think we're in one of those areas that people are really actually reading that. So that's why I reached out to y'all to try to get a copy of the one he sent out just to get an idea. And I loved it. I think that would be a huge hit. But I think another big reason I haven't put any money into advertising is we don't have we just got our website set up. We just didn't have, I didn't want everyone looking at our practice and not have something to look at, like a really polished website, a really good, we're getting professional pictures done. So there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to have in place before I really, and again, the capacity. I didn't want to say, hey, come to our practice and not have, okay, you can come in 6 months. We'll see you then. So it was also, I didn't want to turn on the spigot and then not be able to control the flow.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, capacity issues, the first capacity, and like you said, getting the website set up and everything in your name are the first two. And then the marketing piece, then you hit it. I want to pause and just say, like, I'm in awe of how well you've handled this transition. Like, this is one of the best transitions I've ever heard of. So whatever you did to prepare yourself, however you did it, like, you're really on a good track.
Podcast, man, I can't tell you how much knowledge there is. And there's about 5 or 6 that I listen to religiously. And if you're not doing that, you're like your D2 year, I feel like that's the only reason it went the selling doc and everything aside, it went smoothly because I had heard this for 2 years, all the numbers that matter, the KPIs, all this language, these terminologies that really, really helped, I felt.
Yeah. I mean, that's the route I did. I'd be on the bus coming home from school,
Yep.
be D2, be freezing outside, listen to Howard Ferran, writing notes in my iPhone, like,
yep.
Oh, got to remember this stuff for when I own in 4 years.
Yep. I got a document on my laptop called Golden Nuggets, and it was all the stuff I got off of the podcast. Yep.
My Google Drive was the pursuit of ownership, very, dramatic, like some kind of movie or something. And I had all these files in there, and I looked at it when I was like in the time to buy, and it helps. All that knowledge builds up, it really does.
Right. And if you don't immerse yourself, it's hard to pick it up on the jump, when you first buy. So
talk again briefly about like clinical wise. So you said you were a little slow kind of getting in, obviously new out of school. So like, was it just repetition that you picked it up? Have you done any CE in this past 6 months? Like, how did that go?
It was just repetition. There's nothing like at bats. So you just got to get up there and do it. And like I said, having that doc, those first 2 weeks, having him there full time really helped me because he was able to take a little load off of me. And I kind of told the front desk, don't schedule me a lot. And then I started taking the load, so he was able to handle it. And then I started taking more and more patients. So I was able to ease into it. If it had been a walkaway practice, I don't think it would have gone, we wouldn't be where we are if he had walked away. So that was huge for our growth, and it kept our production up. So I was able to do the implant CE. The practice was able to pay to pay for that. I was able to take that out of the cash flow. And then the selling doc was like, I told him, I said, hey, I want to do this week-long CE. And he's like, go for it. I'll cover the practice. Don't worry about it. So,
nice.
That was huge. So there was a lot of things that going on behind the scenes that really set me up to be able to do it, and again, it goes back to, he really had a good system in place.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really good stuff. I want to reflect something in you. Your goal for this year is 10 new patients a month.
I think that's what I don't even know what a good goal is for our practice.
That's like a decrease from most months.
Okay.
So maybe we want to rewrite that one.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay. So I wish I could make an educated. Well, I guess I could look at how many.
Like say you have the capacity. Like, kind of like remove yourself from your current scenario. Like, what would you want for new patients coming in a month?
I'd say 40.
Yeah, I see you in that range, definitely. And what is the combination of marketing that you think will get you there?
I think the good mailers, and probably, this is football area, sports, advertising at those types of events. I don't know how well, like a health fair, they don't really, I haven't seen any evidence of that going on. So I don't know if that would work. And then being number one on Google, I think would be huge.
So you mentioned you're in a town of 5,000. Any other dentists in the town?
There are. We're a county seat, So even though the town's 5,000, I think about 35,000 would live within 10 miles. And there's four dentists in town.
So in that 35,000,
Yeah,
there's 4 dentists?
about. And then we have a periodontist, and the endodontist is an hour away. So we have one, and the periodontist comes here 1 day a week.
Yeah, that's a great spot. I really like combining in some good local advertising in a rural area, especially in a demographic like that. That can work really well. How are the football team in town? Are they any good?
I think they are. I think they're all right.
Yeah.
Everyone tells me I gotta, the staff told me that's if you want to really be seen, that's where you got to advertise.
Nice. Talk about your staff a bit. You mentioned they've been there a while. Are they fully on board with you as the leader going forward? Like how is that going?
They are. They were really, I think, and the sounding doc told me this, if he hadn't have found me, he was a few months away from closing the practice simply because he physically couldn't do it anymore. And I think they knew that, maybe subconsciously. I don't know if he ever told them that, but I think they saw where he was going. And I think he was scared of that, and that rubbed off on them. So they were, I don't want to say grateful, but they were excited that there was a new lot, fresh blood coming in, and they have just been awesome. They've supported me in every decision, and I told them there's going to be a lot of changes in terms of how things are done, just because we're different. We're 3 generations different in how we practice dentistry. The materials he uses, the materials I use, the techniques, just the way we do things. He did all his own lab work, and I don't have the time. And so I think that was probably the biggest change for him was clinically. And we had one assistant we just assigned an assistant to each of us because it was too hard for them to go back and forth and prepare a room for me or for him because he was using just different materials. But they've been great. They've done a great job, and they've supported me the whole way.
Are you doing any kind of like team meetings around these goals you have? Like how have you structured how you're following through with everything?
I wish I could say we'd been having some team meetings, but right now it's pretty much me and the front office manager discussing things, and then she schedules to those goals right now. I do think that's somewhere we could grow, is starting to have more team meetings and having the whole team on board. But again, we've just been busy, and it's hard to 7 or 8 o'clock we go, and they're setting up at about 7:45. The only thing we do is bring them in earlier. I've thought about doing that, but again, I didn't want to rock the boat too hard, too fast. And I hear both ways. I hear sometimes just do it, rock the boat.
Mm-hmm. That's my side.
Yeah.
Rock the boat, no matter what happens to a fault. No, but my reflection to you would be that your goals are modest. Like the office did 1.1, you want to do 1.2. Like you can blow what the seller was doing out of the water if you want and if you're committed to it. I mean, and it's obviously a choice you make whether you are or not. And I think one of the avenues of getting there, if you want to make those more ambitious, is adding the whole team under the umbrella. It's good to have like your point guard, your office manager, like you and her or him, to like being a solid team with stuff, but like having a really cohesive full team can get you higher than the goals you set forth, would be my reflection.
Okay. Yeah, I've toyed with putting it at 1.4, but then again, I don't know, because it really, and I don't want to use the word scared, but here in the past few podcasts y'all gave with the honeymoon phase, I think that was my wake up call. I'm like, crap. Yep, that's literally what happened. We had this awesome 6 months, and I'm like, again, I'm waiting for that other shoe to fall now, and I've been looking at next month's numbers and practice by numbers, and it just doesn't seem to be going up with our predictions as it did last month or the last few months.
Yeah, and I think the honeymoon phase can only be a stop if you make it. Like if you don't know it exists and you don't do anything differently, and then it happens, it can happen. But you're very aware of what could be ahead. That I don't want to say like fight against it, but like you don't have to let it happen. Like it doesn't have to be a thing for you. I didn't have a honeymoon phase. Like I was about the same as you. I started in May. My biggest months ever were January, February, March after that 6 months. So like it doesn't have to be a thing.
Okay.
Anything else around like vision, anything other info of the practice we didn't cover before we get into the PBN?
I think one of the best things that Doc did besides his staff is the patients are really well trained. They have a very high dental IQ, and he really, he took pride in how he trained them and educated them. And so, when I go in there and say you need a crown number 15, they say, "Okay, doc, you're the doc." There's very, very little pushback on these established patients. So they've all been, I think that's probably been the easiest thing. You get your hand slapped the first few times and then you get hesitant to make those recommendations. Well, that didn't happen to me. It was, you need a crown on number 15, that amalgam's leaking. It's, an MODBL. It's time to crown that tooth. Okay, whatever you say, doc. And then they schedule. There hasn't been that pushback. So that's been huge from a, production standpoint of I'm able to talk to the patients and they listen.
So aside from the patients being agreeable, like what inside of you did you not like hinder your diagnosis and what you present to people? Because that's something we see a ton. Like new owners get in there, they see stuff, they don't really want to say anything, just out of like fear of what the patient might say. They're just meeting this person. Like how are you not able to not let that hold you back?
I think I tell the patients, as I said, if that was in my mouth or if that was in my dad's mouth, this is what I would do, and that's the truth. I think if you honestly believe that, it's not even an issue. If you can just sit there and say, if this was my dad's mouth and he had this leaky MODBL, I would do it. And I think they pick up on this, and I hope they pick up on the sincerity. But I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. I love how you said that. That's such a good thing for people to hear. Did you introduce any like diagnostic tools that the seller didn't have, any cameras or anything like that?
No, he already did SopraLife intraoral images. The only thing I'm probably going to introduce now is doing a full set of pictures on new patients, with a DSLR and blowing those up, because the SopraLifes, those little intraoral cameras, they're okay, but the image quality is not there, and the patients have no idea what they're looking at. Like, what tooth is that? Whereas I think with the big DSLR, you can really show them this is this part of your mouth, and so that's probably the only thing I'm going to change. But otherwise, no, they were already doing most of that.
Sell me more on these big cameras.
Which one?
I don't see it. I don't know. Keep talking about it. Try to get me convinced that these are a thing I need to buy, because right now I think they're a waste.
You do. I don't know. I haven't really used them. I just know that from a records standpoint, there's a lot of times whenever they'll come and say, "Hey, Miss Susan's coming in tomorrow. Do you remember about number 8, that facial lingual you're going to do?" I'm like, "Nope, I sure don't." So I have to go in the next morning and look. Oh, okay, yeah. As soon as I see the teeth, I'm like, yeah, I remember now. But it'd be nice if I had all those images on record, even just for my own like record, so I can look at it and say, "Oh, yeah, that's what I'm doing tomorrow." But from a patient education, I can see the value of being able to show patients what their arch looks like, like what all 28 teeth look like at once, or 32 teeth, as opposed to showing them a grainy, blurry, saliva covered picture of one tooth that has a gray line going down the side of it. And again, it's the trust. They trusted me and they go, "Okay, yeah, that's a crack. Okay, I got it." Whereas if you can show them a nice HD quality picture, but again, I don't have the experience with that. That's all hearsay.
Okay. All right. I'm like 20% there.
Damn.
That wasn't that good, but
okay.
It's good. So like, do you see the hygienist taking those every time? Is that how you see it like playing out?
I see it as a new patient exam. Take the picture an hour. We'll schedule that for an hour and a half. The hygienist will take those pictures, or an assistant will come in and assist with that and take pictures. And then we'll do it if we have an ortho case or a big, aesthetic case or something like that.
Okay.
But I think our patients, certain patients, I think would push back on doing that. I've been here, coming here for 20 or 30 years. So I figure it's easier to start the change and see how it goes and see how the staff picks it up with the new patients.
Yeah, I like that. Why is there only one front desk?
There's about to be 2.
Okay.
So she is a rock star. She does everything. Greets the patient, answers the phone, does the billing, insurance claims, pre-authorizations. She does everything, and it's way too much for one person. and I've already talked to a new person who does that at another office, and I'm going to try to bring her. She said she's willing to come over. So I think if we do that and have her become the treatment coordinator and talk to patients, because right now it's pretty much all on the assistants and hygienist, and they're great at what they do, but they're not the best at presenting treatment. And the front desk is really good.
When is she starting?
I'm hoping within 2 weeks.
Nice. You're on top of it, man. Good job.
I'm trying.
All right. You got anything else before we go into it?
No, I'm just trying to practice my numbers up here.
All right. So we'll pause the interview here, and then we'll come back next week and look at Dr. Joe's practice by numbers. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Joe. I know I certainly did. George, of course, has several thoughts for us, so we're going to kick it over to him. This really reminded George of his own acquisition, so I think he'll touch on that here.
Well, I think I can really relate to first just the two things, the honeymoon phase, that first 6 months, it was like the exact same 6 months, right? He graduated, his first 6 months was, in this practice with a seller. Like that was exactly my situation. And the seller leaving in my end, like it was 6 months, and in his case it was that same timeline. It very much signifies like symbolically the end of the honeymoon phase on multiple fronts. For one, we talk about it a lot, but like whenever I look at a client's practice and practice by numbers that's in the honeymoon phase, I'll see like a really high diagnosis percentage in their recall exams. I'll see high treatment plan sizes. I'll see pretty good case acceptance from like a recare based treatment treatment planning. Typically your recare patients have higher case acceptance. And so your practice is like this inflated period of success that I think it's really important to use that to set up sustainability long-term. That I learned the hard way. My seller left and I thought things would just keep kind of cruising the way they had been. And two things really happened. So one, our diagnosis stopped kind of like 6 months, like on a dime. And then the other thing that happened is, there's kind of like this leadership that like is almost unspoken when the seller's still there. The staff kind of stays in line, they're used to behaving a certain way around your seller, and then they leave and it almost feels like, your parents gone, and now it's like you have to really get the reins on the practice yourself. And so, for me, a year ago now, it was definitely a rude awakening of like, okay, that was not sustainable on multiple levels, and I need to up my game as a leader, and then I also need to build sustainability into my practice. And so I see both of those things coming for Joe.
Yeah, and how did you kind of navigate that, like the dealing with the staff, you now being their boss and owner, more in actuality? Because before you were always been, but the seller was there, and they kind of deferred to, in this case, the couple as still kind of their leaders. Now, how do you kind of take the reins from that?
Well, I think they always viewed me as the leader of the practice. I was the decision maker, but it was the coming on time to work and doing the things they're supposed to do. That was just happening because my seller was there. And then, it really, I think at first I walked in with this kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, like an equal mindset of we're all part of the same team and we're all teammates. And then as I, kind of went through that experience, I really had to embrace the fact that I'm the boss, and I had to be the type of boss I wanted to be. And I think that was a period of a lot of personal growth for me, because that was something I was uncomfortable with. I wasn't comfortable calling myself a boss and, being in that role. So it was definitely something I had to come into.
And now you have boss written on your wall somewhere, right? You have.
Yeah. So I took a piece of paper and I printed online this quote that says, "A boss is like a dirty diaper, always on your ass and usually full of shit." And I hung it up right behind my desk to let my staff know, one, I'm the boss, and two, that doesn't mean that you can't tell me your opinion or what you think, because a lot of the times I'm wrong and I need to hear that from you. And that's really the culture that we have. And that funny photo is definitely part of it.
Nice. And I also want to touch on goal setting. We see this a lot with clients where they're, say, pretty conservative with the goals they set, and really trying to encourage them to stretch, his or her limits with what they achieve. Talk about how you navigate that with your own clients and kind of setting goals yourself.
Well, I think a lot of times we think growth is linear, and so like, well, this year I did 1.1, so next year I'll do 1.2, and then maybe 1.3, or maybe if I'm ambitious, I'll do like 1.5. But a lot of the times it has nothing to do with like a linear trajectory. It's so much more like you can take steps, to go from 1 to 1.5 to 2, anyway, it's not linear. And so I think You need to really look at what does a practice that does whatever number I want look like, and figure out how you're going to build it that way. And then you have an idea of how much time that takes. But I think just putting a number out there just to put a number out there is great, but then you need to kind of think about what that number looks like on a daily basis and then build that.
Yeah, it's almost like there's tiers of different practices that do a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
They have a certain staff, they have a certain patient number, the doctor's doing certain things. Like you said, it's not a linear growth, it's jumps.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at it, the number of practices that do over 1 million, I think is like less than 30% of all dental practices do over 1 million. And for a solo to do over 1.5 is got to be like 5 to 10%. But just that extra 30% bump is really difficult for people because there's a lot of capacity issues that people run into. And so it's hard to get past that. And so I think when you really look at it, it has nothing to do with a linear trajectory. It's, people run into issues around the same time, and navigating those issues is what gets you past them. And so I think goals, you really need to think about where you want to be long-term and then figure out how to get there. And incremental steps in between are just kind of your path to your final, your long-term vision.
And you mentioned the capacity issues there. That's something that's going to rear its head for Joe, and it is currently doing it in his practice. It's something we touch on a lot in part 2 of this interview, so we'll leave it for that. But it's one of the what I call his biggest eggs of what he has to change in his practice in order to get to where he wants to go, and not just be at that plateau level. Especially now, leaving this honeymoon phase, his new patients are very low. He didn't invest in marketing, and this time his seller was there, and he's going to start to see the effects of that with the plateauing, unless something changes, in my opinion, the capacity.
And one thing I did notice is the number of patients he has versus what his practice does. He has a lot of room to grow internally to financially grow his practice so that he can support some of the physical growth or expanding of capacity that he might need. So I think he's set up nicely to, if he really wants to push, to really do that. We'll talk about that more in the part 2 outro.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of meat being left on the bone. I mentioned a lot in this interview how I really love the practice he found. I love it. The staff sounds great. The seller sounds super supportive. He's a really cool guy and a great leader. And I really think the sky's the limit for him if he's kind of committing to making the necessary changes in the practice that's going to get him to where he wants to go.
Absolutely, great interview, Matt.
Oh, thank you, George. It's so good to see your face right here. It really is such a joy. Okay, so we'll see you next week, part 2 with Dr. Joe. Again, I'll be right next to George, so that'll be fun. See you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Practice Underwater. We'll see you guys next week.
If you're interested in one-on-one coaching with either Dr. George Hariri or Dr. Matt Garino, our contact emails are in the show notes.
And if you're interested in being on Practice Underwater as a guest, where we can look at your practice anonymously, you can go ahead and contact the email in the show notes and follow those directions to get on the show. Thanks, and we'll see you guys next week on Practice Underwater.